Greatness does not begin with money, luck, or opportunity. It begins with the way a person thinks. In modern history, many successful individuals have proven this through their own lives. Famous entrepreneurs such as Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and Jeff Bezos all started with big ideas and a strong belief in their abilities. Their success shows that our thoughts can shape our future. In the famous book Think and Grow Rich, author Napoleon Hill wrote a very well-known line, "What you think about, you become." However, if thinking has such great power, why do so many people still fail to achieve success? Is it because they do not truly believe in themselves, or because they have not discovered their inner potential? Today's story will help us find the answer. One day, at a busy railway station, there was a beggar who survived by asking passengers waiting for trains for money. Every day of his life was the same. He sat in his usual corner, stretched out his hand, and hoped that someone would give him a few coins so he could get through the day. His life seemed to have no change at all. One morning, while begging as usual, he noticed a well-dressed man stepping onto the platform. The man wore an elegant suit, carried himself with confidence, and looked like someone very successful. The beggar thought the man must be very rich. He told himself that if he asked this man for money, he might receive a generous amount. With that hope, he quickly approached and stretched out his hand. But instead of giving money, the businessman looked at him and asked an unexpected question. "You always take from others, but have you ever given anything to anyone?" The simple question shocked the beggar. In all his years of begging, no one had ever asked him something like that. Feeling embarrassed, he replied that he was only a poor beggar who lived on the kindness of others and had nothing to give. After hearing his answer, the businessman smiled slightly. He said that in life and in business, there is always an important principle called exchange. If a person does not bring value or something useful to others, it is difficult to expect anything in return. He explained that he was a businessman, and in his world everything was based on giving and receiving. Therefore, if the beggar had nothing to offer, he could not give him any money. After saying this, the businessman boarded the train and left, leaving the beggar standing quietly on the platform. The words were not rude, but they made him think deeply. For the first time in his life, he wondered whether people rarely gave him money because he only asked but never gave anything in return. That night, he could hardly sleep. The businessman's words kept echoing in his mind. If you want to receive something, you must first give something. He began asking himself what he could possibly give to others when he seemed to have nothing at all. 2 days after that encounter, the beggar still did not ask for money as usual. He sat in his familiar corner of the station, lost in thought. The businessman's words kept repeating in his mind, "If you want to receive, you must give first." But he wondered what a poor man like him could possibly give to anyone. On the third day, while sitting near the railway tracks, he suddenly noticed a patch of wildflowers blooming brightly beside the platform. The small flowers with their vivid colors caught his attention, and he stared at them for a long time. Suddenly, an idea appeared in his mind. He thought that if he could not give money or anything valuable, he could at least give people these flowers. Immediately, he stood up, gently picked some flowers, and brought them back to his usual spot. From that moment on, whenever someone gave him a coin, he smiled and handed them a flower in return. Surprisingly, many people happily accepted the flowers, and some even smiled and thanked him before leaving. In the following days, the beggar continued doing the same thing. Every morning, he picked some wildflowers near the tracks and brought them to his usual place in the station. Whenever someone gave him a coin, he smiled and gave them a small flower. This simple act slowly attracted more attention from the passengers. To his surprise, people did not only accept the flowers happily, but they also began giving him more money than before. Some even stopped to chat or thank him for the small but meaningful gift. Over time, he noticed something interesting. When he had flowers to give, he received more money. But when the flowers ran out, fewer people gave him coins. At that moment, he began to understand an important lesson. People like to receive something in return when they give. Even a small flower could bring joy and value to someone. This small change helped the beggar realize that life is not only about asking and receiving, but also about exchanging and creating value for others. One day, while giving flowers to passengers at the station, the man suddenly noticed a familiar face. It was the same businessman he had met before. The beggar immediately felt excited and quickly approached him while he was sitting on the train. With a smile on his face, he said, "Sir, today I have something to exchange. If you give me some money, I will give you these flowers in return." Then he held out a few fresh flowers he had just picked. The businessman looked at him for a moment and smiled with satisfaction. He took out some money, handed it to the beggar, and accepted the flowers. Then he said something that surprised the beggar greatly. "Today you are no longer a beggar. You have become a businessman." Those words made the man stand still for a moment. He looked at the flowers in his hands and began to think. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was not simply begging for money. He was exchanging something with others, just like real business people do. This new thought began to change the way he saw himself. After hearing the businessman's words, the man stood quietly for a long time. The sentence kept echoing in his mind. "You are no longer a beggar. You are a businessman." At first, he found it hard to believe, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized there was a deep truth behind those words. He looked again at the flowers in his hands and remembered the past few days. Every time someone gave him a coin, he also gave them a flower. It was no longer begging. It was an exchange. People were not giving him money out of pity, but because they received a small gift that brought them joy. Suddenly, he understood something important. He was not a beggar at all. He was selling flowers. Even though the flowers were simple, they still had value to others. This realization filled him with excitement. On that very day, he made a bold decision. He would leave the station and begin a new life. He did not want to return as a beggar anymore. He wanted to become a real businessman. 6 months later, at the same busy railway station, two well-dressed men happened to meet again. They shook hands, but one of them looked at the other with curiosity. The face seemed familiar, yet he could not remember where they had met before. After thinking for a few seconds, he asked, "Have we met somewhere before?" The other man smiled and calmly replied that they had met twice before, right at this station. Hearing that, the man tried to remember. Suddenly, his eyes widened in surprise when he realized the truth. The man standing before him was the same beggar he had once refused to give money to, and later bought flowers from. The former beggar laughed and explained that he no longer lived by begging. After leaving the station, he had started a flower business and gradually built a stable livelihood. Now he was traveling to another city to expand his business further. The story amazed the businessman and made him admire the man's transformation. Hearing this story of change, the businessman was both surprised and curious. He asked what had caused such a dramatic change in such a short time. The flower seller smiled and calmly replied that their meeting that day had given him one of the greatest lessons of his life. He explained that in the past he always believed he was only a poor beggar with no value, someone who could survive only by relying on the kindness of others. But the businessman's words made him realize an important truth. People can only receive when they learn to give. From that moment on, he began to change the way he saw himself. The man realized that he was not useless after all. He could still create value, even if it was only through small flowers. Once he started believing that he could become a businessman, that belief gradually changed his actions. The change in his mindset opened a new path and helped him build a better life. After their conversation, the two men shook hands once again like friends. This time they no longer stood on different levels as before. The former beggar had become a confident businessman with clear goals and direction in life. They boarded different trains, each continuing his own journey, but the lesson from their meeting remained deeply meaningful. The story shows that a person's life is often determined by how they see themselves. If someone always believes they are small, weak, and without value, it becomes very difficult to change their destiny. But when a person begins to believe in their own abilities and recognize the potential within, they can create remarkable change. Simply changing the way we think can open new opportunities in life. When you recognize your own value and dare to act, your future can gradually transform. Because when your thoughts change, your life will change as well.